Welcome back to BadgerBlitz TV, your Rivals.com destination for all things Wisconsin athletics. I'm Matt Perkins, joined, as always, by BadgerBlitz.com editor-in-chief and publisher John McNamara. Great to have you back on the show, bud.
Yeah, good to be back. We had to let the young buck, Donnie Slusher, carry the load for a little while. But, yeah, it's good to be back. Good to see you, Matt.
Yeah, shout out to Donnie for doing a great job. Pulling double time reporting from practice and then hopping on the show with us here every week. But we are back, John, heading into a bit of a lull in the calendar, but that doesn't mean we're going to take a lull here. Wisconsin finished up spring practices this past week. And so I'm going to start with a broad one for you, John. What's the biggest question mark heading into the summer for this program?
Well, I mean, it certainly seems like left tackle now. Kevin Haywood's injured. I don't know that they feel super confident about Leighton Nelson. You saw that with, them going into the portal and looking for guys, and then obviously getting Davis Hines in to potentially fill that spot. We'll have to see there. But I think with what Wisconsin wants to do this year under Jeff Grimes, that's going to be crucial for them to figure something out. It's not going to happen in the summer. Obviously, they're going to have 15 practices in the fall to figure that out. When I got a chance to talk to Hines, and he said, yeah, left tackle was talked about, not guaranteed. I'll play anywhere. To be real honest with you, I think sliding Joe Brunner out there makes the most sense to me. For a few different reasons. The biggest is I think you have more depth at guard. You could potentially plug in an Emerson Mandel or a Kadonko to play those guard spots. Ben Schwal's there, although he missed a good chunk of spring, to maybe be that swing interior guy. But I think Brunner can, one, do it, and two is probably their best option. Maybe Heinzen can play guard there. He doesn't – to me, he's not a – plug and play, no doubt about it, left tackle. I think he could be that for Wisconsin, but they're not going to know that, I think, until the fall.
If that doesn't happen, I really don't think there is a chance that Malman flips from right tackle to left tackle. I just don't see that happening. I see Malman just being Rob Havenstein and playing right tackle the whole time. And
I don't know that solves much for you, right? I mean, then who's your right tackle? I think largely because of, not excellent, great depth on the interior, but I think it's stronger than what you have at tackle, considering the injuries that they have there. So that one makes sense to me. I don't know that you're obviously opening up a guy who started 2 years at left guard and putting him somewhere else. But I do think that he has the ability to play tackle. I think he's athletic enough. I think he found a spot at guard because you're trying to get your best five on the field at that time. And you'd had bookend tackles there for 3 years with the guys that they've had on the edges there. So it was Brunner's ready to play work. We can get him on the field. I think he's versatile enough to slide out to tackle. Will they do that? We'll have to see. I won't get the answer for 4 or 5 more months, but that would be what I would do if I were in those shoes.
I'm with you on putting Brunner out at left tackle because I still think he probably your best offensive lineman, full stop at this point. I think Renfro obviously is still a very, very good center, but overall, I think between his athleticism and his nastiness, I think Brunner is probably your best option out there at left tackle. I think the other sort of big, I don't know if it's big news, but the running back position, you would have said heading to the spring, RB1 was Darian Dupree. Coming out of the spring, it looks like it's Dilin Jones. So, John, who do you think will be taking the first snap for the Badgers on offense when they kick off their season?
I think it's going to be Dilin Jones, and that's not a knock on Darian Dupree or the rest of the room. I think it's that Dilin Jones. I don't want to say today because I think that's too early, that he's going to be a special tailback in the line of the tailbacks that Wisconsin's had there. Kind of a trip down memory lane when you see some of the draft stuff and the guys taking those pictures and those guys that were in that room for Wisconsin. I mean, that's a special group. But I do think that he is someone who, through 15 spring practices has put himself in a position to be a really good back for Wisconsin, likely the starter. You saw Darian Dupree get a little nicked up during camp. I think the expectation is that he's good to go for the summer, good to go in the fall. I think if college football is currently is showing you anything, you're going to need 2, you're going to need 3, you're going to need maybe 4. So, while Dilin Jones could be your bell cow starting tailback, there's going to be room for Darian Dupree, Cade Yakimelli, potentially getting Atuka as well. But I do think that, right now Dilin Jones looks like your starting running back. And, he was, you look at that class, Darian Dupree, I think, got a lot of the buzz. But Dilin Jones was a big 4-star get for Wisconsin, on the East Coast there, the Maryland area. A lot of teams are involved with him. His recruitment was relatively quiet. Florida State was the school that we heard a lot with him down the stretch. He didn't talk a ton until kind of after he committed, but that was someone Wisconsin really, really wanted. And he was the second or third back that they took then? I think Atuka was first.
Atuka was first, and then Jones, and then Dupree, if my memory serves me correct.
Yeah, or maybe flip-flop. I don't know. I could be wrong. But
either way, Atuka was first. Because I remember at the time being like, don't see it. And then Clint convinced me. Then I started to see it.
Well, if Clint tells you it's true, then that's the way I usually go. But yeah, I mean, they wanted all 3, and I think all 3 are going to play a role for them this year, and they're going to need them, right? I mean, I think that they want to get back to running the football, and I think Jones is that between the tackle guy, and you can use Dupree in a lot of different ways. I think they can get really creative with him. How those carries break down, I'm not sure. Where Cade Yakimelli shakes out in this, I'm not sure, but it's good to have those options there, and I think they'll get creative with those guys. But I like Dilin Jones, and I think that he's going to be one of the more exciting guys to watch, during this 2025 season.
In his limited appearances in 2024, he broke a couple big runs and showed that he has some breakaway speed, at least a little bit, and can really get after it. So I think that rotation in the running back room is going to be kind of fun no matter how it shakes out. What's less fun right now is the tight end room. After Koziel was here for a hot minute, but that did not work out for anyone, apparently. Wisconsin brings in Lance Mason out of Missouri State. Is he the presumptive starter going into the fall? Is it a Grant Stack or a Tucker Ashcraft or a JTC Greaves, or is Jackson McGowan gonna make an appearance for us? Like, what's happening here in the tight end room? It's as much of a mystery now as it was at the end of last season, which is not a great place to be in because they were the least productive room on the team last year.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of what you said. Outside of maybe McGowan, I don't know where he figures in here. I don't know if he's kind of trapped in between a wide receiver and a tight end. And but to go back to the top of the board there, he's similar to Heinzen, right? Where it's like, we have a hole here that we're looking to fill. You will come in here and certainly be given an opportunity to do that. But I don't know. I think Ashcraft put together really good spring camp, and he'll probably open, I think, when fall camp opens with the ones. And, Mason's going to have that opportunity. Can he, step up and be that number one? I think he's going to certainly come in there and have that opportunity to be that guy. But it remains to be seen. I don't think they're going to hand that left tackle job over or hand that starting tight end job over. I think they like Grant Steck. I mean, he is a big inline tight end that can go out and, not be a home run threat, but I think he can do a lot for you in the passing game as well. It'll be interesting to see how that shakes out, but I don't think anything's guaranteed at either of those positions.
I do think, though, that in this new Grimesian system, it will fit the skill set of these big and more rugged blocking tight ends that they have, because they will be asked to block more. And we know that. So, that's not necessarily the end of the world, but we'd still like to see production out of them. The big news of the offseason was heavy edges on the defense. In a lot of ways, as we move to the defense, was heavier edges. John, did this team in the spring show that they'll actually be able to stop the run come this fall?
It's tough to get a gauge of that in the spring. It's tough to get a gauge of that in the fall, right? I mean, you're not live tackling all the time. You're not bringing guys to the ground. You're not necessarily saying that was a sack or that was a stop at the, behind the line of scrimmage. So it's tough to say, yeah, they figured it out. We're not going to see that until the fall and, once they start playing live games, but they certainly got bigger, right? And that was an emphasis, and I think they accomplished that. And, you look at the recruiting, they're certainly looking to do that down the road as well. This isn't like, hey, we need to do this for one season. You look at a guy like Carmelo Reed, 6'7", 250. He's cut from the same cloth as a Michael Gardner or a Corey Walker, those jumbo outside linebackers. I think they'll play with their hand in the ground. But, you go back and look at the Iowa tape. You look at the Nebraska tape. I mean, you're just getting gashed in the run game. You had to get bigger. You did it. Now can those parts come together? I think that what you saw in the spring was encouraging. But I'm not ready to say, yeah, that problem is fixed. Let's move forward here. They got to prove it, right? But I do like the depth there in the defensive line. I do like what they brought in on the edge there. We'll have to see how those parts kind of stick together in the fall.
Yeah, I think the position group in general that we're probably least concerned about is the defensive backs. You have 4 really veteran guys back there starting, and it looks like Latimer is going to be starting in the slot, the transfer from Jacksonville State, who has a lot of football experience. And so I do feel like at this point, this might be the best secondary Fickle has had during his time at Wisconsin.
Yeah, I mean, veteran group, right? I mean, you go Austin Brown, Preston Zachman, Hallman, Forkering. Those are all guys with, well, I don't know if you can say anyone is out of eligibility anymore, but all those guys on paper traditionally are coming up on their last year of eligibility. So you have that depth there. Deani Hill, who may be the next guy there at cornerback, he's a senior as well. Owen Arnett, maybe the next slot guy, he's a senior. So there's a ton of older dudes there. Now, will it translate? Yeah, I think if they can stay healthy, specifically at cornerback, you really like Hallman and Forkering. That could be one of your better cornerback duos that you've had in some time. They got to stay healthy because they're not very deep, specifically at that cornerback spot. I think you like Matt Young. You could play him. Trainer potentially there as well at safety, but they're thin at corner. I think Emilio Agar can help you, but beyond that, there's a lot of young dudes. So they got to stay healthy, but I like what they have up top.
Yeah, Agard, I know, as I think both Donnie and Seamus have written about, was one of the stars in the defensive backfield in spring. It's really sort of separated himself already from the rest of his freshman class from this past season, and really could be a special kid going forward for the team. Let's move then, John, to some 26 prospects who were in town this past week for their official visits, including 3 very, very, very long time targets for this staff. I think a lot of these kids were offered as like freshmen, if not early in their sophomore years, in King Liggins, Gavin Mueller, and Messiah Tilson, all from Illinois. You had Luke Sorensen, the tight end from California, also in town for the weekend. He's considered, I think, a very long shot at this point to land at the Badgers, but hey, you never know. But Mueller has been a long time top tight end project and prospect for them. Let's start with him, John. He dropped to top 4 recently. He's announcing, I think, on May 14th, 15th, something like that, give or take. How does Wisconsin stand with? Is he now? I think he's now a 4-star. I think he's now been bumped up to a 4-star on Rivals. So how does Wisconsin stand with him at the moment, heading into his upcoming commitment?
Yeah, right there, Matt. He's coming off an official visit, like you talked about. Wisconsin's been there for, really well over a year, where it's consistent. You're our top guy type conversation with him. Then you have Colorado, LSU. Are there as well, the Notre Dame. It's an interesting group.
That is an interesting group of 4. I will say, I don't think I've ever seen those 4 together in any sense outside of like here I've been offered by 60 schools, right? One of those graphics.
Yeah, so it's like, let me lay out 4 where I'm going to get a real unique experience depending on the way I go. If you're a glass half full guy, like, a Wisconsin fan might be, it's that Wisconsin's been there more so than the other 3. And that's not even close, right? He's been to campus, probably 7, 8, maybe 9 times, throughout his recruiting process. Got a little connection there with his uncle played for Wisconsin. So I think, all of those things align where Wisconsin also says, you are our top guy and you've been our top guy for a year. You have Colorado in the mix, which I know is intriguing. He's talked to Rivals.com about, my dad was a huge Deion fan. We got to see him, be around him, and that's the visit that he's going to take before his commitment. LSU is obviously an interesting one. Just where he stacks up on that board, I'm curious to hear more about in the coming days here. And then Notre Dame, which is like Wisconsin has been in these situations before where you're on a guy, on a guy, on a guy, on a guy, on a guy. Notre Dame shuffles its board a little bit, offers, boom, commitment, especially with kids from that, greater Chicagoland area. So May 14th, I believe, is the date. It's, some guys I got a really good feel for, to be honest. I don't have a great feel for this one. I might have to give Clint Cosgrove a call here. I know that he was up in his own stomping grounds with Gavin during his official visit. So we'll see where Wisconsin winds up. Colorado is the one I'm really watching, to be honest with you, during this official visit. We'll have to see how that shakes out.
I think King Liggins is a really interesting project. I keep saying project. I don't know what is on my brain today. Prospect. I guess all prospects are projects in some way, shape, or form. But as a prospect, they've had long time needs at the defensive line. Liggins is someone they've been on for a long time. Do you think that he ends up at Wisconsin? Because I think he's been arguably the top defensive tackle on their board for a while.
Yeah, he's like the Gavin Mueller version on the defensive line. They offered him in the summer last year during camp, and then obviously he's another guy that's been on campus a ton for Wisconsin. Going into that official for Wisconsin, I think Iowa was the school to watch for him. Very, very Midwest, recruitment for King Liggins. So I don't know. I don't know if Wisconsin did enough to top Iowa. With the way that he's kind of structured things, it seems like he wants to maybe make a decision a little bit earlier, maybe not take things into June, but nothing really official on that front just yet. But again, a guy that Wisconsin's been on for a huge amount of time at a position of need. Again, I think Iowa was in a really good spot before that official. I think Wisconsin is kind of neck and neck with them. It'll be interesting to see if he takes, one more official, 2 more as we get into, late May, June area. But right now, I would say it's a battle between Wisconsin and Iowa, but that is not for certain. He hasn't come up with a top group or top list or a commitment date, anything like that. But those are the 2 I'm watching right now heading into May, which is just a couple hours away here.
Well, if you want to talk about a Midwest recruitment, Messiah Tilson with the top 4 of Illinois, Iowa, Minnesota, and Wisconsin. It's not going to get much more Midwest than that. Again, defensive back prospect here in Tilson, who I think has huge athletic upside. I think he's someone who could really pop off as a senior and get to the next level. So we'll finish out, at least with these officials here, John. Messiah Tilson, how do we feel about him? How does the staff feel about him? And sort of, going into the next big cycle of official visits.
Yeah, I mean, that is a Luke Fickell-esque defensive back, right? 6'3", 175 pounds, big time upside, long. You talked about, he's another guy. It's of the guys that we talked about, maybe I don't have the greatest feel on him. He's taken a lot of visits. He's been to Wisconsin, 3 or 4 times. I think Jack Cooper's done a really nice job in that recruitment. I think early returns on Cooper have been pretty solid, kind of across the board when you talk to guys, specifically those safety targets that they've been on. I feel like Wisconsin maybe comes up a little short here, but that's just kind of my gut feeling on it. But he really hasn't tipped his hand a ton either. We do have those, if you look at his profile for Rivals, we do have the schools that we do think are near the top. But, he's another guy where, he took an early official, and we'll see what schools he pops up to in the next, I guess month or so now. We got a little bit of a break before they can get guys back up on campus. But that's a tough one to call right now. I don't know if Wisconsin feels great, but there's certainly obviously in the mix there. And he's been a guy that, like I said, been to campus, is a priority for them. Safety isn't a huge need, so you could preach that, hey, you're going to be one or two guys that we take in the cycle. We really like you. We've developed guys with similar traits to you. I think that all works in Wisconsin's favor. We'll have to see how that one shakes out too.
All right. So then we'll finish up today here, John. We've got, I think, 3 more weekends later in end of May, early June, where there's a lot of officials that are going to be happening. Coming out of the end of those officials, how many commitments will the 2026 class have?
I'm trying to see how much work we're going to have to do in June. I mean, you're going to double this class, right? It's at 6 right now. That'll be doubled. I mean, you go back and look at these last couple cycles, really dating back to when that summer opened up for officials, and your commitment list booms, right? And that's not a Wisconsin thing. That's a college football thing where guys get it done in June. Some bring it to July. But, I mean, the bulk of these guys want to get this done in the summer before their senior seasons to know where they're at. I think that's amplified even more with the transfer portal and the limited spots and the potential 105 that's going to hit these schools, although that doesn't seem to be maybe locked into place. There's nothing is ever truly set in stone, but history tells us that, Wisconsin's list is going to, explode in June. You could see 10 commitments, and I wouldn't be surprised if they're at 15, 16 by July 1st. That wouldn't surprise me because that's how quick it happens in June. That's what
I was going to put the over under at 16 and a half. I'm not going to lie. I think that they're really going to try to wrap this up as fast as they can with the exact understanding of what you mentioned, right, John? Like, you want to have to deal with the portal as little as possible. Mm-hmm. You are a college football GM. Because, at least with the portal, the cycle is so quick that you don't get to know players. You don't actually get to know them. All you've seen is tape and like one human interaction, right? Whereas with these high school kids, these prospects, you've been with them, you've known them for years at this point. And so you know who they are as people a lot more. And so you have less variables that way, or at least you have known variables that way, I should say.
Yeah, and this is a huge, huge senior class. I mean, I think off the top of my head, 25 scholarship guys. Now, again, there's roster management in terms of the 105, whether it's going to be there, whether it's not going to be there. But this could be a 23, 24, 25 scholarship guy class for Wisconsin, especially with all the things you talked about, Matt, and what Luke Fickell wants to do, build it through high school. You're always going to have the portal, but this is going to be a really big class for them. I would say, like I said, 24 guys would not surprise me. 25 if it's the right fit of guys. So, yeah, if you're setting the line at 16 and a half, I'm going to bet on the over, Matt. Give me the over all day long.
2 quarterbacks? Already got Ryan Hopkins. Is there going to be a second quarterback? Now, that I think is the real interesting thing that I'm keeping an eye on.
I don't think so. They canceled those officials with McWhorter and Burgess. And now you're playing this is recruiting, right? You're playing a dangerous game with Hopkins, who basically said, like, yeah, I'm committed, but definitely keep my eyes open and my ears and everything else possible. So, but what are you going to do? You're going to tell the guy no? A big 4-star kid from California is at the top of your board? It's living on the edge, man. Living on the edge.
The adage is, that you've always had to keep recruiting your guys even after they've committed. They have to keep recruiting him like he's uncommitted.
Yeah. So if you're a Wisconsin recruiting fan or Wisconsin fan in general, just hope that a school like Ohio State locks up their guy sometime soon. Some of these other schools they're maybe involved, but then he goes to Mater Dei, and there's going to be 100 schools there in the spring watching these guys during first. It's tough, right? But there's no other way to play this. You're telling Hopkins, you're our guy. We want you to commit when you're ready. You committed. Now we're going to do everything we can to keep you. That's just the way things go, Matt.
Well, John, I'm going to do everything I can to keep you here on Badger Blitz TV. We'll be back with everyone again next week. Even if it's the quiet season on the field, we've still got plenty to talk about here. So make sure you are subscribed to BadgerBlitz.com for the best Wisconsin information and message boards, the Badgers Den, anywhere in the known universe. Until next time, he's John McNamara and I'm Matt Perkins, and we'll see you in the Den.